This is A Few Good Fights, proudly brought to you by the MMA Movement. I'm your host, Noel O'Keefe, and I'm joined as always by Robert Palin and Sean Taylor. This week, UFC middleweight Elias Theodorou gets cut from the UFC. We're joined by fellow Canadian James Lynch to discuss, and I think you will be surprised. Is the hype merited for Artem Lobov and Lobov Malignaggi? Have they gone too far? And we discuss domestic violence within MMA. This is the big MMA news, and I'm delighted to say we are now joined by the Score's James Lynch. So James, thanks a million for taking the time to come on to A Few Good Fights, my friend.
Of course, thanks for having me on. First time I'm on the show under the new rebrand. Happy to be a part of it.
Let's start with a fellow countryman who was being cut from the UFC, and a lot of outrage in some ways on social media around this. Elias Theodorou went 8-3 in the UFC.
Won the other fighter.
Was on a 2-fight win streak. Lost his last fight in what, let's be honest, we even called it a fugly fight.
Yeah.
Wasn't the greatest fight, but was it worthy of him getting cut, James, in your opinion?
I think it was. I know that's a little bit surprising. I'm wearing the red here today. I'm a Canadian and everything else, but I see the UFC's perspective on this. I'm not part of the outrage crew of, this is, terrible and everything like that. I understand it from a business perspective. It's not fun to talk about fighters getting released from the UFC. Nobody likes to lose their job. I understand that, but looking at his last fight against Derek Brunson, it was not a good fight. You guys referenced it there. There's been a couple fights with Elias where it hasn't been too exciting, and I realize that he has an 8-3 record in the UFC, but looking at it from the UFC's perspective, I think they realized that Elias was not going to get any better. The thing people aren't talking about is that he's 30 years old. It's not like we're talking about a prospect who's 20 and has an 8-3 record, and there's a chance for him to improve and potentially be that title challenger like someone, some people thought he would be when he won the Ultimate Fighter. We haven't seen that. So I think they've realized in a division where, in a new era in ESPN where they want exciting fights, I think to the UFC's perspective, he was expendable. And I know, the job security thing as far as losing one fight, it doesn't set a good precedent, but I understand it because really, was Elias going to come back and, really change things up and be this exciting fighter? I don't think so. You have to go all the way back to his fight with Roger Narvaez, the last time he finished an opponent. So I think it's been sort of a long time coming for the UFC to need an excuse to not have Elias, and I think they found it in him losing to Derek Brunson.
Yeah. That's very. I'm kind of glad that you said that because there isn't many people actually saying it. I think that he should have been given another shot, but I completely understand your point. Like the UFC is in the business of what they say of being the best organization with the best fighters. So if they feel somebody isn't up to scratch, they probably should let them go. If they feel like they're not going to make it to a certain level, they probably should let them go. And to be honest, the UFC never come out and said, we're going to give you 3 fights. If you lose 3 fights, you're gone. Like, that's just something that we assume. Yeah. It's not something that they actually have done. They've done this before. But I'm kind of glad you said that because I'm actually surprised you said it, but I'm kind of glad.
For me, I'm in the minority, and I realize that a lot of other Canadians and just other people in general are like, I can't believe this. It's like, really, go watch that Derek Brunson fight again and tell me if that's the type of fights that they want. Like, I had someone today arguing with me that Elias is the most popular Canadian fighter. I'm not disputing that, but the fact they didn't put him in the main event of that Ottawa card, I think, speaks volumes to his fighting style. And let's be honest here, guys. We know this business quite well. Twitter followers don't equal pay-per-view buys, and I think that's something. If we're going to base it off that, then why is Chase Sherman? Why was he cut from the UFC? He had plenty of Twitter followers, and he's not on the roster anymore. So I think people got to quit putting so much stock into that. Elias has definitely done a fantastic job of his brand. I mean, he's an Invicta ring boy, making history doing that. He's got a Pert Plus sponsorship. Like, this guy's clearly done a good job of his brand, but we'll see if that brand can translate outside the UFC. I don't think there's going to be a big demand for him. I see people saying, "Oh, Bellator's got to snatch him up," or one, or everything like that. I think with his fighting style and the fact that he's not a talker, that's the other thing. Like, it's not as though he's popular, but he's not a guy that you're seeing all these MMA websites aggregating his interviews. The two things we know about Elias in his interviews is he talks about how he's great with preparation and he's this pro marijuana thing, which I have my own view on that. I think that's fine. I think it's good that he's pushing for that, but that's not something that people are dying to hear about every single interview. So I think that played against him as well, and I think that's why he's not on the UFC roster right now.
And it was, in some ways, when we broke this fight down against Derek Brunson, I was like, this has ugly road all over it. This is going to be a terrible fight. And I think that plays against him as well, is that although he went 8-3, he's not even considered a good gatekeeper, because it's going to be very difficult to put anybody in against him and look good against him with his style of fighting. So I think that went about him. You sort of half answered what my next question was going to be, is what's next? As in, I don't see Bellator wanting to snap him up. I don't see one championship wanting to snap him up. So what does he do? Does he just go into promoting shampoo and being a ring boy, or is there life elsewhere further afield maybe for him?
I have a feeling this may be it for him, to be honest. I know that sounds crazy. He had an 8-3 record in the UFC. He's 30. I mean, he is getting up there in age, but still at an age where he can make a run somewhere else. But I just wonder, just knowing what he was paid in the UFC, I don't think one's going to throw a bunch of money at him. I don't think Bellator is going to throw a bunch of money at him. Like I know that Kajan Johnson, for example, who actually had a pretty decent run towards the end of his UFC career, was robbed in one of those fights, I believe. Bellator wouldn't sign him, and they told him basically you need to get a win. And I think with fighters that aren't these marquee names like a Rory McDonald or Ryan Bader, that Bellator is not going to go out of their way and throw the big bucks at Elias, because he's not exciting. And again, he's not someone that's going to get on the mic and create a bunch of headlines. So I think that I think either retirement or I don't know who would sign him unless someone's going to give him the money. But I think from his perspective, knowing what his brand's worth, he might go look at doing other things, whether it's in television or whatever. But I don't know. I think the future for Elias Theodorou is very hazy. And again, I say all this is without meaning any disrespect towards him. I think he's a great guy. I've interviewed him even long before he was in the UFC. But I'm calling it like it is. I just think when you have a not a very appealing fight style, that you're at risk at the UFC.
Do you think that, like we kind of said, that the UFC don't really do the whole 3 fights are out or 4 fights are out, but do you think that this will be a trend for the UFC going forward, that they'll look at the guys' performances, not just if they won or lost, and they will release more people like that?
I think there could be some more pressure on the fighters as far as putting on exciting fights. Like Ed Herman's still on the UFC roster because he just won by knockout. Like he'll continue to get fights. If he fights like that, Ed Herman's not going to win a UFC title. I'd be willing to put money on that. He's not going to fight for a title. But at the very least, he's exciting to watch. You'll get a knockout out of him. Elias, like I said, I think his last knockout win 2013. That's too long that you've gone without finishing a fight. And it's not like he's fighting world beaters. There's fights. A lot of his wins are against guys that either aren't in the division, aren't in the UFC. And you need finishes. So I think that's really important as well. And I think we could see that with ESPN and with, I think, them struggling to get pay-per-view numbers and things like that. I think it will contribute, and it could be a trend. And is it fair? No, but the word fair and deserving, we can throw those out in MMA because it's an entertainment sport as well. And you have to look at the bottom line when it comes to business.
Like, I think if the amount of fans that were outraged by Elias's cut were actually buying pay-per-views or his merchandise, if they all step forward, he probably would still be in the UFC. It's like everything. When somebody comes to an end, it's easy to be outraged, but not actually tune in and watch. Moving on, Conor McGregor, his left hand was in a cast after a sparring injury, and it looked like he was targeting a late summer return. There's no news on exactly what the injury or how serious it was. Jason Perillo has openly said as well that he wants to see RDA fight McGregor. With the recent matchups being made, James, what do you see as the next path or the next opportunity, I suppose, for Conor McGregor in the UFC?
That's the $1 million question, literally. I mean, who is going to fight Conor at this point? Everyone wants to fight Conor McGregor. I'm sure, they know it's a big payday. I mean, the options are getting limited. I don't think the Gaethje fight's going to happen. I think if that was going to happen, that would have happened already. I think maybe they're going to do Gaethje and Paul Felder. I don't know, but that would just be a guess on my end. I think the fight they should do, let me just back this up 1 second. I think they should have done the Nate Diaz fight if they could have, because agreed. I think that was a good opportunity for Conor to potentially win a fight, because with the layoff with Diaz and they have history, and cash in on that now. I mean, there's a chance we'll never see that trilogy fight now because they booked him against Pettis. And I understand why they did that. Maybe Conor wasn't ready and they had Diaz, and Diaz is like, I'm ready to go. I get that. But I think that was the missed opportunity. But now, I'll throw a name out there that I don't see a lot of people talking about. How about Jose Aldo? For Conor, maybe it's not a huge upside, but for Aldo, he's coming off a loss. He's not going to fight it for the featherweight title anytime soon. I told this to him last year in Calgary when he beat Jeremy Stephens. I said, why not go up to lightweight? Max Holloway is still the champion. He had no interest there. Maybe that mindset's changed a little bit. Maybe he does want to go to 55 for some new challenges. And I think why not do that against Conor McGregor, a fight that I think, people felt if that was, if they did have that rematch, would be a different fight. Not saying who would win either way, but I think that would be a little bit different. But that to me seems like the only big fight out there right now, outside of maybe George coming back or something like that. But I don't see Conor McGregor coming back to fight Rafael dos Anjos or any of the other welterweights, because he's going to come back and fight a named fighter. And the other thing I'll point out too, that Khabib fight is still not booked yet. That seems a little odd to me. I know we had his teammates cleared last week with the NSAC. We haven't seen any confirmation that Khabib is fighting Dustin Poirier. Don't rule out a last-minute Hail Mary that Khabib ends up fighting McGregor in Abu Dhabi. We'll
get back to that. I do like the Jose Aldo fight. Yeah, and like we kind of spoke about this, where Conor doesn't really like to go back and rerun fights that he's won. We've kind of seen that.
Or defend belts.
Or defend belts. But I do think there'll be a lot of interest in this because of how quick the fight ended. Because I think everybody in this room, and I'm sure James, I was kind of disappointed with the end result of that fight. I would have liked to see at least a round to see what would have happened. So I think there is a lot of upside, and Jose Aldo isn't done by any stretch, and it's also a fight where McGregor can come back and it is competitive. It's not Khabib. It's not somebody who was just a crazy stylistic matchup for him. So I really like that fight, and we'll get back to Khabib.
I think it actually works on the level as well, because when Conor beat Jose in the cage, he said to him, I'll give you a rematch. Yeah. I will give you a rematch. So yeah, time has passed. They're both very different fighters. You'd argue they're both not the same fighter. They were. You were probably talking a prime time Conor, prime time Jose then. Very different now, and it actually makes sense, James. We get on to Shelby now, and let's get that booked. It makes perfect sense. But back onto Khabib. Interestingly, that is an interesting fact, but is it warranted of a rematch?
Absolutely not. 100% not. I'm just looking at this from the dollar signs from the UFC. You had this post-fight stuff, and then you also have the trading on social media and all that stuff. I just think money-wise, it is Conor and Khabib rematch, as terrible as it is to say this, is a bigger fight than him and Poirier. It is. It just is dollar-wise. I mean, anytime Conor McGregor fights, that is a huge money fight. But yeah, absolutely does not deserve a rematch. That was a one-sided fight. I don't care what McGregor fans say. That was a one-sided fight. Khabib won that clearly. You should not get a rematch based off that. But if the UFC is in the business of making the most money they can, you do that fight with Khabib. I think that from a business perspective would make some sense. But yeah, obviously merit-wise, absolutely not.
When that fight happened afterwards, I was like adamant. I was like, this rematch is just going to happen, because like if I was Dana White or whoever, the matchmaker, and I went to you and you are the owner of the UFC or WME, whatever. Yeah. And I said, I want to make this matchup because, this is who deserves it and whatever. And then they say, what about Conor? That's the one that's going to make the money. And I'm going, no, we're going to make this one. Like, they'd be like, you're crazy. We're making the one that makes the most money. So I wouldn't be surprised.
An interesting side point to that is with Endeavour going public and stuff, and the ESPN thing, like, they have a big loan to pay back and that. So then you are looking at what makes money.
Yeah, exactly.
That's true.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
Speaking about what makes money, weirdly, Rob has definitely snuck this into the news. I didn't see this. The hype marriage between Artem Lobov and Paulie Malignaggi, which is official for bare knuckle boxing on June 22nd. I actually watched the press conference. What did we make of one microphone for this bare knuckle boxing, who's meant to be throwing big money at their fighters? They turned up with one microphone that Paulie Malignaggi then tried to hit Artem Lobov with. But will this do numbers? Will people tune in? Is the hype warranted for this?
Name-wise, it is, and they're actually doing everything at a good time, because we had, it's Memorial Day weekend in the States today, and you've got the Sweden card, which, no offense, not a huge card. So I think the fact that they did this press conference recently, that was the talk of, for the last week and a bit, is this press conference. And name value-wise, if you look at that leading up until, no offense to anyone on UFC 238, but Paulie Malignaggi and Artem Lobov are bigger names than anyone in combat sports right now, and that's why the fact that we're even talking about this, the fact that this is something that we're discussing bare knuckle, is the fact that those two guys have some serious name power, and that's what it comes down to. I was asked this yesterday on Slip and Dip podcast, is this the biggest fight? From an entertainment perspective, absolutely it is. If you look at the name value of both fighters, this is huge. I mean, Artem has that following from being, McGregor's teammate and everything, and all the GOAT stuff and all that, and then Paulie, obviously his work in the boxing world as well is a big name. So let's be honest, if this was Johnny Hendricks fighting Brendan Ward, no one would be talking about this at all. This would be, underneath all the major news, but this is at the top because these guys, they can say whatever they want. It doesn't matter. People are going to quote them, and the clicks are going to go up on the site. So, I think as far as that goes, I think it's smart on BKB's part, because or Bare Knuckles' part, just because of the fact that we're talking about their promotion, but it's really just because of those two names. Yeah,
and it's hard to avoid. When I was looking for news for the show, that's all that was showing up. That's what people are interested in. And it just is what it is. We didn't cover bare knuckle because it's not MMA. We wanted to cover MMA. But just the fact that this has such close ties to MMA, and with the whole McGregor thing and the whole boxing Mayweather thing, it's just, that's what people want to see.
Are you going to watch it, Rob?
I am going to watch it.
What did we think of the spitting?
Disgusting.
It's too far.
Yeah, it is. And we've seen a lot of just really bad stuff, for fight hype as well. Deontay Wilder in boxing saying he's going to kill his opponent. We've seen this where it's come on, guys, let's be a little bit more creative than that. It doesn't look good, but again, the fact that we're even talking about that, I think means that what they were trying to achieve worked, which is, do something shock value wise and people talk about it and say, I can't believe this. But the reality is they did that on purpose. So.
James, do you think that the fact that we saw what happened with Conor and Khabib, and I know there was a lot of kind of racial and kind of religious stuff happening there, so it was kind of different. But do you think that the fact that we saw the outcome, we saw the brawl in the crowd, that promoters have they should make more of an effort to kind of curtail some of this and make sure something like that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I think in the Conor and Khabib case, it's a little bit different because, like you said, Khabib, those Dagestani gangsters, as they say, they're, you don't want to piss off the wrong person. I think with Artem and, with Paulie, I don't know what his entourage is like, but I don't think they'll have anything like that. But certainly they do have to keep an eye on it. I talked about this when Conor had that tweet with Khabib's wife and everything. That's where it's like, come on, this is looking like, I used the reference in the 90s. I'm going to date myself a little bit here, but the whole Biggie and Tupac thing, it reminded me of that, where it's like, you're getting really personal and you've got some really bad people surrounding these two fighters. Things aren't going to end well. So I don't know if you can police that, but it's certainly something that, the promoter needs to be aware. In this case, though, I don't see anything crazy like that happening, but you never know.
The fight itself, it's not going to be a gloveless bare knuckle fight now. We're going to have gloves with the knuckles exposed. Are they going to be padded gloves or what?
No.
I'd imagine there's going to be wristbands.
Surely this should have been sorted out when the fight was booked.
Yeah, it's because they moved it to Florida, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
I forget. Yeah, it's something to do with the Florida Commission. Now, I read something from Oscar Willis that said that there's just taping up their hands. It's not even like gloves. Oh. The gloves that apparently were circling around were for some boxing promotion or something like that. But I mean, it's just one of those dumb commission things, I think. But hopefully it still ends up being the true bare knuckle because that's their sport. I mean, you have to be as close as you can to that so you can differentiate yourself from mixed martial arts.
Yeah. The fight itself. Do we give Artem a chance against a former world champion boxer?
Yeah, sure. Why not? I mean, here, one thing I will give Artem credit for is that he doesn't get finished in fights, right? So there's always that thing where he just comes forward and does his thing. But I mean, you're going up against a guy who's literally a professional boxer against a guy who has I think he has a losing record or close to a losing record in MMA. He certainly had a losing record in the UFC. I'd have to favor Paulie because that's his game too, right?
Yeah. My only thing for Paulie is his hands are meant to be brittle. That's one thing.
He's getting on in
he is getting on, and when you look at his last couple of fights, he doesn't seem to have that knockout power. But I just think it's going to be more his defense is what's going to win him the fight, not getting hit and countering. That's why, for me, I see it. But Artem, you never know. Ego might get in the way here, and he could stand.
Did you see Artem's face as well? I don't think that scar tissue has cleared up at all, and he's probably going to open up with the first punch, which is going to be a problem as well.
Malignaggi's last boxing match, he got poked about basically by a decent journeyman. To be honest, he didn't do that too much his last few years boxing. So I think that's a bit of a leveler. Yeah, to be honest.
Our next piece is one that's it's. I know we like to keep it light and fluffy and talk, but this one is insane. I've some information, obviously, that reports coming out of Brazil, domestic violence in MMA. So Alex Cowboy Oliveira, allegedly wanted by police after allegedly assaulting ex-wife and running off with their child. Now, since a statement has come out to say the article going around is untrue and not a reality of the facts. The article had said that he had an argument with his ex-wife and then under the influence took off on the motorcycle carrying their 5-month-old son, which is insane. A study then looking at a 2015 study, the amount of domestic violence arrests involving MMA fighters is more than double that of the average national rate, according to the study. Public records research done by the show found that 100,000 US men, there was a domestic violence arrest of 360. In that same sample, HBO Real Sports found 750 MMA fighters and 210 NFL players. There was no comparison listed between UFC fighters and NFL players. Obviously, some notable ones were War Machine, Thiago Silva, Josh Crispy, Anthony Rumble Johnson, Brett Rogers, and we have Matt Hughes recently and BJ Penn as well.
Some of them are alleged, so we just
alleged, of course. But it seems to be a real problem, and again, I was talking to somebody about this, and they were sort of putting down to, is it brain trauma? Is it something along the lines of that? Is it the whole these guys are fighters, and when all of a sudden they're in an argument, it's the instinct is to fight? Is that potentially what this could be? But this needs to be something that needs to be looked into and find resolutions for fighters. Be it if it's counselling within the promotion they're fighting for. whatever it may be. But James, what's your opinion on this type? And firstly, the Oliveira story is horrendous. If even some of the information coming out is true.
100%, and you would think that in a promotion like the UFC, they would have something set up. I mean, they have the Performance Institute to make sure the athletes are optimized and they're eating right and all that. They should get something done for their head. I mean, they're getting hit in the head all the time. I think that's something that's extremely important, but I don't think it's a priority for the UFC. Greg Hardy's still in the UFC. He's getting promoted heavily. He just got a fight booked actually last week against Juan Adams. Like, to me, if they were really serious about it, they would address it on a broadcast. They say, we don't tolerate this. Dana said before we have a zero tolerance policy, but then you have Greg Hardy in there. And I realized that the charges were, I think they were acquitted, but then that's also could be a case of the victim not coming forward. I mean, I'm not an expert on that, but that's sort of the understanding from all of that. I mean, they really should address it, and they should, if they want people to not look at this sport, not look at the UFC as turning in a blind eye to it, then they shouldn't have Greg Hardy fighting for them, period. And I think with cases like this, yes, you have to wait till all the facts come out, but they got to get some education, and they got to get these fighters getting their heads checked and making sure that, because I can imagine as a fighter, and I'm not excusing any actions whatsoever by saying this, but, it's a very stressful job. You don't get paid very well. You're getting hit in the head all the time. Some fighters are having to work other jobs. You have kids, you have families, you have all these things. Like that anger, you'd hope gets taken out in the gym, but sometimes, people aren't smart about it, and they're doing it in very terrible ways. So it's something they should address and they should take care of it. But I just don't think it's a priority for the UFC and even Bellator. I mean, I've not seen anything from Bellator either saying that, hey, we don't stand for this. They should have some education, at least acknowledge it, because I believe the NFL does to a certain degree. So it's something that they really should address, and it's kind of the one of the dark topics in MMA that people don't really talk about too much, unfortunately.
The one with Greg Hardy showing much the UFC don't care about is Rachel Ostovich was coming back from the attack of her partner, who's an MMA fighter as well, and they matched them on the same card.
Yeah, and then they kind of said that, they asked her for permission and stuff, but it just seems like a really bad idea, even from a PR perspective. I just think they've handled a lot of these situations really badly, because even if she says it's fine, I just think they need to look at it and say, well, from the outside looking in, it doesn't look fine. And even the situation with BJ Penn, we don't know exactly what happened. We know it's all alleged, but that report comes out and he fights a few weeks later. Yeah. And it just seems like the UFC, just for, to even save themselves a PR nightmare, should look at these things and, as James said, come out and say, we don't stand for this kind of thing and we're going to investigate this situation. BJ Penn's not going to fight until then, or whatever, with any situation, Oliveira now going forward. But yeah, there's so many situations they've done over the last while that they just haven't handled it well at all.
And when you look at the likes of one that really stands out for me was War Machine, what he done to that.
And obviously that was outside the UFC at the time.
That was Jesus insane. Christ, but for me, the UFC aren't directly responsible for all their athletes. They can't watch everything they do. But if an athlete is on your roster and is under this type of allegation, they shouldn't be allowed fight until it is the same way if there's an allegation from USADA that somebody has popped, they don't fight. So it should be the same if you have these types of charges put up against you and allegations, it should be cleared before you step back into the octagon. But it's a tough subject to talk about. As much as you're saying, James, it's not really spoken about. It's difficult to talk about because it's not the topic people really want to hear, but it should be, because it could be a mental health issue, it could be numerous issues, but there's people assaulting their partners, to hear driving off on a motorcycle with a 5-month-old baby, that is insane.
Yeah, I just watched, actually, they did a 30 for 30. I'm sure you guys have seen those. They did one on Junior Seau, who played in the NFL for the San Diego Chargers and the New England Patriots, and he had some serious CTE, and he ended up committing suicide. But they just talk about sort of his downfall of him being this, complete, just great guy to be around, really personable, and him just taking this complete turn and being basically a completely different person. Wow. And they basically linked it to his CTE. So I wonder if that plays a role in it as well. But getting back to Hardy just quickly, I mean, I think it just goes to show that at any cost, the UFC will try and make a buck, because if Greg Hardy was not Greg Hardy, if Greg Hardy never played in the NFL, Greg Hardy's not in the UFC, 100%. I know that for a fact. But because he did, and because he has this notoriety, they're willing to ignore that just to make some extra dollars on the NFL fans that did watch Greg Hardy when he did play, and that's sort of their philosophy on that. And look, I mean, we have to cover it because Greg's in the UFC. I know there's people who are like, oh, I won't even cover or look at it. Like, I have to look at Greg Hardy, just the fighter, and the other stuff is obviously very unfortunate. But the UFC, they should be a little bit more diligent about things like that, and just being more transparent about their policy, because like I said, Dana White, we've seen him, mind you, Dana said a lot of things that don't end up true, but his whole, we have zero tolerance. That's clearly not the case here.
Yeah, I think as well, the whole science of head injuries, we obviously know quite a lot, but there's still a lot to be found.
The sport is still so new as well. We're still seeing the effects. This is kind of the first batch of people who see the effects of CTE on. So I think like in the next 10 years, you'd hope to see a lot of advances in what can be done and what we know about it.
Yeah, but even like in pro wrestling, like you've seen with like Chris Benoit and stuff like that, where they tested his brain after he obviously committed suicide and killed his family basically, and they said he had the brain of like an 85-year-old Alzheimer's patient because of all the damage to his head. So it's insane. It's mad. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Moving on. It's a tough one to move on from. Tyron Woodley's got diagnosed with chronic arthritis and made an exemption for the UFC to return. Imagine that exemption. He's going to have to take certain supplements in order to allow him to be active to recover from training and stuff. But yeah, that's a big one for Woodley. This stage of his career to be diagnosed with this.
This might be, I don't want to say career ending, but it's certainly going to alter things going forward if this is something he has to deal with on a regular basis. And he's not 20, he's in his 30s, mid-30s. So terrible news for T Wood. And I mean, who knows what's going to happen at this point as far as how he'll look going forward. I mean, the fight with Usman didn't look great. Was that part of it? I mean, who knows at this point? But certainly not the news you want to hear from a fighter who's in his mid-30s and just lost his title.
Yeah, he mentioned he'll have to find states that will allow him to take cortisol shots the week of the fight or something like that. I don't know if you've ever seen is there many states that allow it, don't allow it? Have you ever heard of states not allowing it?
I didn't even know if that was allowed, period. I wasn't even aware that states do allow that. But I mean, is that really something that's safe if he's having to do that to keep competing? And it seems a little crazy to me. Again, clearly not a doctor, but that doesn't sound very good as far as him resuming his career. And, is he ever going to get to the level we saw him, when he defeated Darren Till and, was the welterweight champion? Who knows? But this doesn't anytime you hear something that says chronic and you need to take something for that chronic, whatever disease or disadvantage, I should say, it's never good news.
Yeah, and that's the thing is we all see the fight and everybody thinks that's it, but there's 8, 10, 12 weeks leading up to that. It's
probably tougher. Yeah,
that is probably harder for him leading up than the actual fight that night. Adrenaline kick in for the fight, but it's the getting to the gym in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening, and you're putting all these injections to just do that.
Eesh.
Big ask. Cody Garbrandt is rumoured to be leaving Team Alpha Male after all the snake talk. This comes on the heels of his manager, the very honest and open Ali Al-Aziz, saying that Cody will be making changes in the future. Realistically, we spoke about this, I think, off air after Cody's last losses. There was a lot of hype. There was a lot of talk when Dillashaw left the camp. But for fighters, it's normal for a lot of fighters to move camp to camp, maybe to get some certain training at a certain gym. You maybe don't see it as much now because MMA gyms are so well rounded and a lot of the coaches are brought in. But when you look at Cody Garbrandt, you're talking about a guy who was the champion, who's on a skid now, coming off some big losses. He needs a change. So
he lost his coach as well.
Yeah,
Justin Buchholz is
exactly
gone from now.
So is this just the right time for Cody to make a change, or maybe, I don't know, go Jackson Wink or American Top Team, whatever it may be?
Or maybe just go train with Justin Buchholz like Cynthia Calvillo did. I mean, she's pretty much left Team Alpha Male from what I hear as well. So that's an option too. But clearly when you lose a couple fights like that, I think you got to go back to the drawing board and at least try something different. Kevin Lee, I would say, is in that same boat. I think I think at times we've seen fighters, where loyalty ends up killing a career, where you're just, you want to stay at the same gym, but you're not evolving. You need to, try some different things. And conversely, you don't want to be that fighter like Overeem who goes to a new camp like every year. You want to, try and find something that works. So I think in Cody's case, though, it makes sense. And whatever he's doing, especially when it comes to his striking, he's got to, reel it in a little bit. I think he's just getting caught because he's being a little bit too aggressive. And I also think he underestimated Pedro Muñoz's stand-up because, clearly Muñoz has knockout power. We saw that in the fight before that against Brian Caraway. Why go for that firefight? Why not try and just, be a little bit more technical? So I think honestly, I think it's a good move for him just to switch things up and try and get back on the winning track. And we're talking about a former champion here who's on the brink of losing. He's lost a couple fights in a row now, so it's very difficult position to be in.
I always said it, like, he looked incredible against Dominic Cruz and he looked like a different fighter. Like since then he hasn't looked like that guy, and I always found it weird. I'm not sure if it was the change and Justin Buchholz leaving. I'm not sure part of the timeline that came, but it seems like he does need a change. And I always find it very weird when, like, there's a way of leaving the camp. Like, I think TJ, the way he done it reportedly was probably the wrong way because he was coming back to spar with guys and then going off training. But, like, if you want to leave a camp, you'd assume that the guys who've been trained, which you should feel, okay, he feels like he needs to do this for his career, let's let him go and let's be gracious about it. So like, hopefully if he does leave, it's gonna be like that, you know, it's gonna be gracious. And like
again, just from the local MMA here, like I know a lot of guys from up north, they're going over to Team Cabon and they're training under Colin Heron with the likes of Darren Till. And they go around, they get the experience, they go train. Like Reese was over in Canada training up with George St. Pierre, and you know, you get fighters like they go and they might do, you know, a training camp like 10 weeks. They may not have a fight go over, but just to have new looks, new bodies to train with. And I don't see any objection, and that's why the whole snake rat thing comes out and all that type of talk. Makes no sense to me. PFL, well, I'll let you go on this one. We just covered this briefly, James. There was some surprise. A big surprise for me was Jeremy Kennedy suffered a big loss, a big loss. And I think Jeremy was sort of talking coming in here thinking, I'm on my way to $1 million here. I think he was really taken by surprise. He got clipped and got early. Was it a case of him just getting caught cold?
I think it was because, I mean, that was the first time he was finished in the first round. Alexander Volkanovski couldn't finish him in the first round either. And we've seen the success that he's had after that win over, a pretty dominant win over Jeremy Kennedy. I think it just speaks to one of the flaws in the tournament, which is just that if you have a situation where a fighter misses weight, like in the case of what happened with him, where he was supposed to fight Popo Buzeja. Buzeja misses weight, he can't even compete. I think he was 10 pounds over, and they give him this last-minute opponent. Like, that stuff you see in the regional scene, and the odd time it happens in the UFC, like something that close to fight time. But I mean, him getting a last-minute opponent switch, like he probably had no idea about this opponent because I had never heard of him. And you know, he goes out there and he gets caught. I don't put too much stock into it. I don't think Kennedy's done. He's young. He's at a good camp now at Extreme Couture. He was at a good camp before, but I just mean now he's getting more high-quality training partners. I think it's just a case of getting caught. And I think with a lot of these guys, like you look at like Damon Jackson being on the receiving end of a pretty impressive highlight reel knockout. I mean, he comes from a good camp. I think it's just a lot of these guys that come through, they don't know a lot about them. There's a lot of footage. They don't have time to sort of take it all in. I think that plays a role in some of these upsets that we've seen in PFL especially. How
is PFL going over in the States and in Canada at the moment? Like, we don't really get it over here, so we just kind of see the news and watch the fights online. But like, how is it going over? Are people enjoying it, or how's it working?
I honestly don't know, to be honest, like, because it's usually on like Thursdays. TSN's Aaron Bronstetter would be the guy I would sort of check in with because it airs on the network he works for here in Canada. The US, I don't have a clue because it's on it's on ESPN Plus, but we don't even get that in Canada. A lot of people don't even know that, like, we don't have, you know, that whole issue with like, oh, you got to get ESPN Plus to get the pay-per-views. We don't have that in Canada. We just order it off a regular provider, and everything else is on TSN, which is owned by ESPN. So it's a lot easier as far as that goes. But I don't know. I mean, it's tough. I like the format. I think it's good, but I think there's not. I don't know. I have my mixed reviews on it because I don't know realistically how much money they're making from viewership, and then also just in general, like with the fighters, how much they're getting paid, because they're getting paid pretty well. I've talked to a few fighters that they're like, yeah, you know, the price tag's pretty good compared to some of the other promotions, but we'll see how long it lasts. I mean, I hope it does well. The more MMA, the better, but I have my doubts.
Yeah, I agree. We thank you for the time. I have to say, I know you've another interview away from us, but again, great to get you on. Finally, get you on. In the background, we were organising. We had Gremlins one week that it didn't happen. Then the hour changed with all the changes, and it really threw us over. So it was great to finally get you on. For people, give a plug where to find your social media and all the interviews that you do conduct.
Well, first off, thank you guys so much for having me. Yes, glad it finally worked out. Definitely looking forward to coming on again. Everything is so much easier now. You know, usually when I go on these shows, I'm like, I work for this outlet, and it's difficult to find all my stuff. But I'm in one spot now. I'm the senior MMA news editor at The Score. If you don't know The Score, it doesn't matter if you live in the UK or anywhere else, download the Score app. That's the easiest way to find all my work because I actually run the entire MMA section over there. All my interviews are on there. If you go out there, you can find links to, you know, the YouTube channel, which I just started up at The Score 2 weeks ago. All my interviews, podcasts, reaction videos, all that stuff is on there. And easiest way to find me is on Twitter @LynchOnSports. And again, can't thank you guys enough for having me on. I'm looking forward to the next time.
Absolute pleasure, man.
And congrats on the gig. Cheers.
So once again, thanks James Lynch for joining us there for the big MMA news. Now for some other stories or articles. You might know that Brendan Schaub brought out his Showtime stand-up special. I think you'd be surprised. So I just was scrolling the internet and I happened to see this. I've watched it. Any of you guys watch it?
No.
So which stand-up was worse? His stand-up as an MMA fighter or his stand-up as a comedian? Thought it was phenomenal. We also then had the great Jack Slack tweets, which I really thought summed it up beautifully. Brendan's stand-up special opens with a sketch where he plays himself, a homeless man, the security guard at the venue, and drags up Strong start. We'll keep posted. An hour later, he then posts, got to the end, and I don't have any further observations. But it's okay, because neither did Brendan.
Boom.
And that, for
time.
Me, summed it up.
Yeah. So yeah, it wasn't great, was it?
No, he was even on. Rogan, and this podcast starts. You know the way, we'll 3, 2, 1, we're live, whatever. And he was like, "Yeah, man, you know, tough week. Yeah, man, really stressful. I don't understand, but don't read the comments. It's fine. Like, you'll look at this in 10 years' time and you'll move on from it." So it was basically Joe Rogan going, "Yeah, that was shit, Brendan."
Oh well. But like, it shouldn't have been great. No. He hasn't been doing stand-up for long enough. That's not a bad thing. He just hasn't been doing it for long enough.
Do you know what? The man is selling out theatres.
Fair play to him.
As much credit to him. But it was fucking shit. Like. It was shit.
Boom,
it went on too much about fashion. And, he's one of these.
That's his thing, yeah.
I'm a big guy and, these people in Texas didn't like me and stuff. He told us sort of... Sorry about Travis Brown. But
I just generally don't find American comedians that funny.
See, Louis
a lot of them aren't funny, but yeah,
Bill
Burr, Jim Jeffries is good, and
Jim Jeffries is Australian.
Oh Jesus, did I say Jim Jeffries? He's on an American show. What's his face? George Carlin is awesome. Do you like George Carlin?
George Carlin's good. You put me on George Carlin when I was telling you how much I love Louis C.K. I don't care that Louis C.K. had a wank in front of women. He asked them. They said, yeah, forgive him. Come back. He's going to be fucking fantastic when he comes back. Cannot wait. It was a bucket list to go see Louis C.K. And Brendan Schaub is not Louis C.K.
Well, yeah.
But look, he's in there. Do you know what? He's like some fighters who are in promotions because their mates are in the promotion. He's on that comedy circuit because his mates are on that comedy circuit.
And he's popular.
And he can tell an odd joke, but he's not a storyteller.
The theatres that he's selling out, he's getting booked for them because he's a name.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Fair play to him.
Like, as in, don't get me wrong. I'm being like, I watch a lot of comedy, so I'd be like, I gave him this. I watched the full show. Normally, if I'm watching comedy and I don't like the first few gags, I go, this guy's not for me.
How long was it?
It's an hour and 5 minutes that I'll never get back.
Well, stretched it out to an hour. Well done.
Yeah, there was some ha moments, but it was never like
it wasn't splitting laughs or stuff.
Yeah. Okay. So stick to podcasting and be like, it shows. If Anthony shows the likes of when he's working with Theo Von and stuff like that. That is Theo Von is the A side and he's the B side, if you like,
Racking.
In other news, Paddy the Hooligan wins South Dublin County Council seat.
Go on, Paddy.
Who fucking Paddy? The Jobestown. What a man.
Fair play to him.
And I love this comment from the council, from a council to a councillor. Fair fucking play to Paddy Hoolan.
I don't live in the area, but apparently he's doing great stuff. Apparently
he topped the poll.
Yeah, he was there in his shorts and his sleigh was getting elected. Everyone else them.
And you know what? It's gonna be it was a Paddy's under the Sinn Féin banner, and it was a bad day for Sinn Féin in the elections. But fair play to Paddy Houlihan, and I tell you, I think he'll do great things for his community.
He said that. I'm pretty sure he said something like, "I'm not gonna go for a seat in the Dáil because I don't know if I can be that corrupt or something like that."
What a win.
I'd love to see him in the Dáil, man. That would be brilliant.
Him and fucking what's his name? Flanagan and
him and Ming Flanagan.
Ming Flanagan. And what's your man's name? Mickey. What's his name?
Mick Wallace.
Mick Wallace.
The pink short guy. Yeah.
Do you remember your man in the Dáil going, "Fuck you, Deputy Stag. Fuck you."
Yeah.
I'm sorry for the unparliamentary language. Go check that out on YouTube.
With all due respect, Deputy Stag. Fuck you.
I think he was Sinn Féin as well, wasn't he?
Fucking brilliant.
But but you know what? We're joking because obviously fair play to Paddy Houlihan. He's not in there because of whatever. He is a real local. Paddy loves his area where he's from. He'll have the best interest of the people in this community. So well done, Paddy. Fair play to you, and I hope you make a change and a difference for your community. Fair play to you. Other news then as well was Tony Ferguson tweeted Ali Abdelaziz telling him to keep his name out of his mouth.
Yeah, they're going back and forth. They don't like each other. Ali seems to trash talk more than his clients, which is weird.
Yeah. Ariel has called out Ali for actually tweeting from his clients.
Yeah, I know, yeah. I love that. He tweeted under one of the tweets saying, like, did you forget to log out of your friends? Yeah. Gas, but yeah, they're
Ali's a bollocks.
Yeah.
That's been the big MMA news. Big fights go down this weekend. UFC on ESPN Plus 11. Gustafsson Smith. Let's talk a few good fights. UFC on ESPN Plus 11 goes down this weekend from Stockholm, Sweden. Your main event is Alexander Gustafsson taking on Anthony Lionheart Smith. Both fighters coming off a loss to John Bones Jones. Both two very different finishes. Gustafsson obviously got put out of there while Anthony Smith just kept fighting on and fighting on and fighting on. The old Lionheart, as you might say. But what way do we see this one going, Rob?
Firstly, I just think it's funny that both guys are coming off a loss to John Jones, because if you want to say, show me the state of the UFC's light heavyweight division, you go, check out this fight. It's basically, John Jones is too good for everybody, so he just beats these guys and they have to fight each other over and over again. I feel like I've seen all these fights in this card for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's just the whole European thing. We always see the same guys on these cards. But Alex is a good headliner to have on the card, and Anthony Smith, apart from that last loss, he's looked good. So I do like the fight. In terms of how it goes, I would favour Gustafsson from the get-go. I just think he's a way better fighter in basically every aspect. I think he's a better boxer, better footwork. Smith has good striking and he's very aggressive and tenacious, but I just think Gustafsson is a better all-round fighter. And what we seen in his last performance, I believe, in Sweden against Glover, and when he just lit him up with that uppercut, I feel like we might see something similar. Like Anthony Smith, you know, he's been around for a long time. He's not like this young guy coming through. But also Gustafsson has been talking about potentially retiring, you know, over the years. So you never know what Gustafsson you're going to get. But I do favour Gustafsson here, and I like this fight for him.
I agree, as in, when you put it like, as an athlete, technically Gustafsson ticks all the boxes above Smith. But as a fighter, I just think Smith has... If you're in a bar fight, you want Smith on your team. He's just that guy that'll get a bloody nose and just keep swinging. But I think against Alexander Gustafsson, you're talking about a guy who pushed John Jones to the limits in their first
and showed
contest.
his heart as well.
Yeah,
showed his heart.
He got hurt, and he was openly speaking about it on the MMA Hour recently about he's never been hurt as much as he was in the John Jones fight, the last John Jones fight. Wow. And he put that down to why he was finished. He couldn't do much with his groin. He had a groin either tear or rip or something. I'm not 100%. But so he couldn't get a lot of it off. He was saying like he doesn't get held down and doesn't get finished like that, and you know he just couldn't get out of it with the groin. So it's one of them that in some ways I'm like, it's like McGregor. The stories coming out about McGregor about the broken foot and all. Eventually injuries come out, but it's one that it's weird the way it comes out just leading into this fight. But Smith, I think like Smith, when he was on the run of like the win over Volkan Ozdemir, Mauricio Shogun Rua, Rashad Evans, like he was on a tear. Like you can argue, Evans and Shogun were past it, but like I thought the win over Volkan Ozdemir was a big win. So do you know what it is? It's sort of like, he was the guy that's going to fight John Jones again if he doesn't go up to heavyweight and fight DC, really, isn't it? That seems to be the game. I don't think they can do Gustafsson 3 so quick. Maybe if Smith got a couple of wins together, they could. It was
very dominant though, wasn't it, the John Jones one? Like, there's no... At least with Gustafsson, you can point to that last fight, not the last one, the one before that, where it was a war and Gustafsson had a good shot. You know, he put on a very good performance, whereas you look back at Anthony Smith, he didn't really. It was just kind of a flat performance, and not because he put on a bad performance. Just John Jones is so good.
He was saying like in the fight, he was sort of saying like he wouldn't stand in front of Jones and stuff, but he did. He looked at it like he was stood in front of a mirror. He was waiting on Jones to act, and then he was trying to counter it. This one he can't do that again. Gustafsson fights long, and as you said, if he goes to the mat, you favour Gustafsson down there as well. For me, Anthony Smith's way of winning this fight is getting dirty and trying to land them big, heavy shots and test Gustafsson. Has that chin gone? Can he not take the shots like he used to? Can he get hurt? Go to the body, work his shots, and that's something that Anthony Smith can do very well. He can really rip to the body, but he's a heavy hitter as well. For somebody who came up a weight class as well,
heavy hitter,
he's still a big hitter. But for me, I just think Gustafsson, he's fought the bigger and better fighters, and I just think he potentially has too much here for Anthony Smith. But it's and this sounds like get off the fucking fence now. In some ways I won't be surprised if Anthony Smith gets the win, and I don't mean disrespectfully to Anthony Smith, but it's potentially if Gustafsson, as you said, is thinking retirement and is thinking is getting out of there. I never like it, as I know you do, I never like when a fighter's talking about retirement when they're still active. Maybe if it is in the background, keep it there, but you know, when they're thinking about it, their mindset coming into the fight. So maybe Anthony Smith catches him, gets him on a good night, and he's not fighting prime time Gustafsson. But again, in front of a Swedish crowd, he won't want to fall short the way he did. What was that against Rumble? Absolutely.
Yeah, like I was gonna say that. I was looking back at his record, Gustafsson, and like if you want to point to some of the matchups that Gustafsson had problems with, aside from Phil Davis, which was really early, and I think he fixed that. He actually went and trained with Phil Davis after that fight, and he fixed what the problems were there. But if you want to look at the fights where he had trouble, it was probably only Anthony Johnson, apart from Cormier and Jones, and that's just a skill deficit. But in terms of like one matchup that you could look at and say, oh, here's the blueprint and here's how Anthony Smith could have success, it could be Anthony Johnson because they're both big hitters. But I still don't think Anthony Smith is as big of a hitter as Rumble Johnson. Rumble Johnson hits like
well, I don't think many heavyweights hit like Rumble
exactly.
Johnson.
So it's a tough one. But I'm going to go with Gustafsson in this one.
I am the same. And I would imagine, Sean, you can confirm, I would imagine he's a big favourite.
Yeah, so Gus is 3-10 and Smith is 11-5. So yeah, quite a big underdog. But for me, I kind of have question marks over both guys. I mean, Smith froze. It was his first main event against Jones. Yeah,
I think it might have been actually.
He froze like his main event again now. So I have question marks with him over that.
I don't think his reason Jones for freezing was
I understand
main event.
that,
I think it was more so who he was fighting.
He's been saying in the lead up to this as well. I think he was on Ariel's show and he said he has no game plan for Gustafsson, which is interesting.
I don't mind that either. He wants Luke Rockhold next. Rockhold coming up to light heavy, so a win will probably get him that. But yeah, if he was to beat Gustafsson and then beats Luke Rockhold,
I think Rockhold's a guy who could get you a title shot very quickly.
Absolutely,
yeah.
And like I said,
shine from him.
Incredibly impressive in times, Anthony Smith. But I think people just throw shade on them recent fights because there are fighters that aren't in their prime, I suppose.
Yeah.
So yeah, big favourite Alexander Gustafsson at home. I'm going Gustafsson, and I'd say I'll go to 5.
I'm gonna say the same. Like he went decision with John Jones. They both did at one point, but Smith recently went. So yeah, I think he can stay in there, stay competitive. But yeah,
I'll take Gustafsson as well in the distance.
Yeah, you're getting a little triangle on his arm.
Jeez, we all went the distance.
Co-main is a big hitters. We've got Volkan Ozdemir against my mate Elias Theodorou. This one is. This is a weird one because you look at Volkan Ozdemir, he's gone from title contention to on a 3-fight skid. He lost to Daniel Cormier, lost to Anthony Smith, Dominic Reyes. He beat Dominic Reyes. One of the worst decisions in recent memories for me in the UFC. Close. No, definitely won it. Coming up against Latifi. Latifi is also coming off a loss, but again fighting in front of the home crowd. His loss was over Corey Anderson. Before that he had some good wins over the likes of Owen St. Peru and Tyson Pedro, and this is Latifi's dangerous in all aspects, and he can really, like, I think with Ozdemir we go under, you looked at his quick finishes of the likes of Jimmy Manaway, who's on this card as well, and you sort of think, big hitter, but what does he do when plan A doesn't work? And I think we've seen that against Dominic Reyes.
I thought we saw a better
He was a bit more patient in his striking, and he was trying to work behind the jab and mix up his combinations. But against Latifi, his hands full with an opponent. He will be looking for the takedown, but can land bombs as well. Almost Dan Henderson style overhands. Yeah,
like I think it was a closer fight. I did score it to Volkan Ozdemir, but I thought it was a bit closer than you did. But I also thought that one of the reasons why the decision went Dominic Reyes' way is just the inactivity by Ozdemir in the fight. And
I thought Reyes was just as bad.
Yeah, they were both kind of bad. But what I mean by that is that we've kind of seen Ozdemir do the thing of going in and just bull rushing somebody and get them out of there. And now we've seen him do better over the distance, but not being super.
He needs to sort of align.
Yeah, so I wonder in this is a really tough one because Ilir Latifi is similar in a way where we've seen Ilir go out there and win decisions and look really impressive with his cardio really good. Last time out against Corey Anderson, it wasn't really that way. His cardio kind of ran out, and he slowed down a lot. But both guys slowed down. So I wonder here if this does go the distance, who's the guy who's going to be able to put on more pressure, who's going to keep their cardio. I'm leaning towards Latifi, not confident with it, but I think on current form as well, them 3 losses, there's going to be a lot of questions on Ozdemir going in here. I know it's a lot of high profile fights as well, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. And you're in Latifi's back garden. It's at home. He's going to have the crowd behind him. And he has put on some really good performances in Sweden, even in his losses. So I'm going to go with Latifi just to have good cardio and just be more aggressive, get some takedowns, because we know Ozdemir struggles with that. And Latifi does have good takedowns when his cardio's there. I'm leaning towards Latifi, but this is a tough fight to pick.
I'm going Ozdemir,
Nice.
and I'm going him in the short range, the gunfight inside. Nice. He carries, we refer to it, we've done this a good few times when we talk about Ozdemir. He has that Shane Carwin power. It's almost like in Kill Bill, you know, where she gets out of the coffin by doing the 1 inch punch. He really has that just end the night power in his hands.
There's no time, as he says.
No time. And Latifi in the clinch, working for takedowns, changing levels, changing singles to doubles. I think he could pull him with Wizard, separate, frame off, land a short hand, and end the night that way. So I'm going to go Ozdemir, and I'm going to go first round KO for Ozdemir and get back in the win. I think age could be a thing here as well. Like Latifi's 35 and Ozdemir's 29. Wow. Freakily, what's weird here is, and this is always funny actually, you see this in a lot of fights actually, Ozdemir stands 6'2". And Latifi's 5'8", so he's a small guy, but the reach is the same. He's like an orangutan.
We were looking at this, yeah. You can explain, Sean.
What?
So the podcast I recommended, was it last week? Podcast I recommended last week. This is exactly what that professional MMA bettor was talking about. So he backs guys with longer reach, but who are smaller than their opponents. Yeah, and his ROI on this is like 30-something%.
Yeah, it's quite high,
massive.
Yeah, and like I think it's weird because when you look at Latifi, he does have that real orangutan.
Yeah, it's like
body mass
about
him.
He can walk on his arms. Like
he's real long. So when he was sitting having a beer with me, I noticed that about him. You know, good friends. But now I just think
going to pick against him.
I'm going to pick against him on this occasion. I just think that short range power of Ozdemir. But again, this is a real pick. Like Latifi has his nights, especially in Sweden. He can look fantastic. But I'm going to back the Swiss man to get it done. Nice. What are the odds on it, Sean? Actually, did you call him out?
Yeah, so quite close. Ozdemir is a small favourite. He's 8-11, and Latifi is even money. But it was interesting. Did you hear Ali Abdiaziz talking again this week? It wouldn't be like him.
Oh, I've heard him talk. But
yeah, he was saying that Ilia Latifi was the one who stopped him jumping off the bus in Brooklyn and attacking everyone who was attacking the bus.
Really?
You know, Ali's really hard and big fighting man and stuff, you know.
Great stuff.
So well done Ilia Latifi on stopping some even more carnage going on there when Ali went to jump out.
This car, when you look at it, it's a night of big hitters, isn't he? Jimmy Manoa, as we said earlier, is on the card and he's fighting Alexander Rakic. 11-1 Rakic, lost his pro debut. Nothing since, just all wins. Well, Jimmy Manoa, talking about age, Jimmy Manoa's getting up there.
He is.
I'm just waiting on this to load and I'll tell you. But I would imagine he's around my age. So I would imagine about 38. Is he 39? Oh, that was alright. He's 39. He's up there. Again, 3-fight loss streak, and some of the losses have been devastating. That Volkan Ozdemir one, 22 seconds. The Thiago Santos one early in the second round. They were big losses, and they're the type of losses that when you see a fighter like Manoa, who, especially the Ozdemir and even the Santos loss, it's them sort of fights that is like they're fighting you in your wheelhouse, where you're the big hitter, where you want the fight to take place, where you think you have the power, and his lights were getting turned off. But when you look at them two fights and you look at what Volkan, like I think the Volkan one surprised a lot of people because Volkan was a little bit of an unknown when he done this to Jimmy Manoa. But Jimmy Manoa's boxing and power is phenomenal, and I actually think he's a huge underdog in this one, which could be the cheeky bet if you're a betting man. But yeah, talk to me about this one, Rob. What did you think? Jimmy Manoa can turn it back around? 3 fights kid.
I like Ratchet here. He's a really, really good kickboxer, and he's had, I think, around 40 pro kickboxing matches before he moved to MMA. And he moved to MMA when he was like 19 or something. So like you can look at Manoa coming in here as the veteran, but at, you know, what is he, 10-1? Or 11-1? And
8 of them by knockout.
8 of them by knockout, and having so many kickboxing matches. To me, it doesn't really look like a veteran versus kind of a younger guy, even though Ratchet is only 27 versus, as you said, Jimmy Manoa was 38, 39.
So what do you think potentially we could see Jimmy Manoa going and becoming the wrestler in this one?
Potentially. He has shot for a few takedowns, unsuccessfully for the most part, but he has shot for some takedowns. But Rakic is a huge hitter. Really, really big hitter.
Just to your point, Sean, about your betting man that you were talking about. Rakic 6'4" with a 78-inch advantage. Jimmy Mano is 6'1", 79.5 reach advantage. So it was the smaller man with the longer reach.
If that comes through. But I'm all over Rakic in this fight. I
think what I'm going to do in this card is I'm just going to...
Just pick those?
No, I'm going to go through the card and pick the exact picks that this guy is going to be on. Just see what happens.
Yeah. I think he also said if he picks between like plus 150, plus 200 or something like that.
It was plus 110 and plus 150.
Yeah. I wonder what the odds are here. But yeah, I'm all over Rakic here. I just think that he's just as big of a hitter as Manoa.
Yeah.
He's a bit wild, but I think that plays into his advantage. And experience-wise, he's fought in the UFC a few times. He has tons of kickboxing matches, and he's 11-1.
You can go down the argument of Manoa has fought the bigger guys
Definitely.
in MMA.
Oh, 100%, yeah.
But again, my concern here is a 39-year-old Jimmy Manoa coming into this. And when you meet Jimmy Manoa as well, like he's a unit of a man. So he's the type of guy that, like, when you look at him in MMA fight, that all that muscle needs a lot of oxygen, a lot of. So when he goes hard and it takes him a little bit to recover as you get older. I imagine that gets harder. But I just the last few finishes that he's been at the end of.
If you go through those finishes, give me a reaction to what these knockouts are like. The Gustafsson knockout.
Oh, that well done.
Horrible. Oh. Johnson.
Yeah, it just
it goes down. It's just they're all like ew.
Knockouts,
And as I said, they were the type of knockouts that this is where he wanted the fight to take place. It wasn't like he was taken down and ground and pounded. He was absolutely polarized in these fights and fucking shadow round, so so I'm going with Rakic here as well, and I'm probably going to go with the finish as well.
Me too. I'm going to go 4th round knockout.
So Ratchet's quite a big favourite. He's 2-5, and Jimmy Manoa is 7-4, which I wouldn't touch with a barge pole.
Next bout on the card, we have Makwan Amirkhani taking on Chris Fishgold. If you were looking at Amirkhani and you want to go on and go, I need to check out this guy's record and stuff, please just go on to Topology. Because his profile picture is phenomenal on Topology. There you are, Sean. He's basically sitting on a couch drinking a martini surrounded by 4 blonde women.
My man.
Mr. Finland. Got his hands full in Chris Fishgold. This is one where Fishgold was, he's coming through Cage Warriors. Everybody was screaming for him to get there. He got there. Kelvin Carter, round 1, loss, and it was like, ooh, it really deflated the hype train, and I took a little bit away of the excitement of, UK MMA fans when Fishgold got the call to the UFC. But he came back against Daniel Teemer and got the rear naked choke in the 2nd round to go 1-on-1 here. But against Amirkhani, Rob, how do we fancy his chances?
It's an interesting clash of styles because they're both really good grapplers. I think Fishgold probably has the better submissions, like catching somebody in submission, but I think Amirkhani's grappling is just better overall. I think his wrestling is much better. Fishgold likes to get takedowns off strikes, and they're kind of power doubles that he gets, not necessarily what Amirkhani does where he can kind of chain wrestling together, which is kind of rare for a European fighter. So I think it'd be an interesting clash of styles. On the feet, I think, if Amirkhani's his cardio isn't there, I think he could have trouble because Fishgold is always really aggressive on the feet. So he could get caught, and he got caught in his last fight against Jason Knight a few times. He got dropped a few times as well. And I know a lot of people thought Jason Knight should have won that fight. It was close. But I just think Amirkhani is the better overall grappler. I think he's going to be able to get it to the floor, get on top. And I don't think Fishgold's going to be able to get the strikes off that he needs or get on top. I think Amirkhani is too good with his wrestling for that to happen. But Amirkhani as well, this is the first time since 2015 that he'll have 2 fights in a calendar year. He's not very active at all. And also his cardio does go. It's happened in many fights. And if it does, Fishgold can capitalise. But yeah, I'm going to go Amirkhani to win. Decision. Yeah, decision.
I'm going to go with Chris Fishgold.
Nice.
Interestingly, and I know it sounds weird, I'm not saying he's going to be distracted by it. I'm not sure if he's a red or a blue, but a Liverpudlian, and Liverpool are playing the Champions League final on Saturday night while he's fighting in Stockholm.
Nice.
This will be an early card from. I wonder will he.
I wonder will he get in, get the job done, and get out and watch Tottenham beat Liverpool in the Champions League final.
Or just say he's not fighting when he's called because the game's on.
Yeah, the match fucking kicks off. Like, yeah, we could be a blue, so I'm not too sure if Chris Fishgold is a blue. To your point, Rob, about the gas tank of Americani, and Fishgold's the type of guy that he could be absolutely have nothing left, and he's just going to keep coming forward. And I'm going to go with the Scouser in this one. I'm going to go with Fishgold. I'm going to do him by late stoppage with that rear naked choke.
He does like it.
Yet again in the third round.
He does like it.
Fishgold out of next gen. Liverpool.
What's your pick, Rob?
Americani decision.
Okay. Americani sounds a lot like Amir Khan, the boxer.
It does actually.
But yeah, the odds in this one are...
Well done, Sean. You put that together brilliantly.
Yeah.
Just so you know, lads.
Yeah.
Amir Khan is even money, and Chris Fishgold is slight favourite at 8-11.
Huh.
It's interesting as well. I was looking up there. Fishgold gave himself his own personal deadline to get signed by the UFC. So he said if he wasn't signed by the time he was 26, he was calling it a day with MMA, and he got signed a month before he was 26.
Oh shit.
Well, there was big talk about him and Paddy Pimblett getting signed for the UFC. We know Paddy Pimblett was like he was happy enough to stay in Cage Warriors. He spoke about it on
Ariel show, wasn't it?
Ariel and stuff, saying I don't need Zems, I need me.
Then he took an L
and stuff like that. So.
Sean, Mr. Shade over there.
Sean thrown shade.
That's hilarious.
And then he took an L. Moving on the card, Christos Glagos taking on Damir Hadjevic. I'm going with that. Hadjevic. Yeah.
Yeah. Bosnian, is he?
Sure.
I like Hadjevic here. He's very, very well rounded, as cliche as that is.
Funny, I think he is Bosnian. His nickname is the Bosnian Bomber.
Nice.
So,
bit of a
cool.
Can't be guaranteed.
It's a great nickname in the next
Marcus Davis was also called the Irish hand grenade, so you never know.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, never know.
A plastic Bosnian.
Yeah.
Awkward striker, but very effective. He's very aggressive, and I haven't been that impressed with Glagos. He's fine. I mean,
he grand that.
I didn't see like a huge amount from him.
He got rear naked choked by Charles Oliveira,
which is fair enough.
That happens.
Yeah,
but
the most. Hadjevic held his own against Marcin Held on the floor, got out some mad positions and won the fight. And also, remember that knee where Marcin Held was going for a takedown? I think he was going for like a single leg. Hadjevic just landed a knee, like a weird low knee, and he just fucking crumbled. I'm gonna go with Hadjevic knockout.
Yeah, I actually think he's a big favourite here as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he's 4-9, so quite a big favourite.
Fair enough then.
Big favourite. Let's speed through the last couple here. The main card. So
last one, right?
Yeah,
one more.
Small main card, is it?
Daniel Timmer taking on Singbing Yo. 9-0. This is
Singbing Yo. 9-0.
Yeah, it's all goes fantastic. Yeah. The Korean Falcon.
He also has no picture on the UFC website.
Yeah. He has a phenomenal nickname though, and he trains with the Korean Zombies. So you have the Korean Zombie, the Korean Falcon. It's got to be more there.
Sounds like a shit Asian version of fucking Power Rangers.
Or no, the Avengers. The terrible Avengers. The Korean Avengers.
The UFC debut, 9-0, champion of course at TFC. A lot of hype coming in behind him from that side of the world. So it'll be interesting to see the debut. How do you think it plays out?
I think Daniel Tamor has had 3 fights in the UFC and they were all losses, right?
Yeah.
So he hasn't really looked that impressive. I think of the brothers, I think his brother is the better fighter. But like he has had moments in the UFC, and he's gone against some really good guys like Chris Fishgold, Julio Arce, and Danny Henry. Yeah, it's not an easy run, but there's going to be a lot of pressure coming in here now. 3 on the trot against a debuting guy who people are looking at as a prospect. So he's going to want to get a win here, but there's going to be a lot of pressure. I watched some highlights of Sang Bin Jo, and he's very exciting. And he, like, the guys who he's fighting, I'm not sure how good they are because some of them are like 2-3, 0-5, 0-3. He has some on there. Like, he has a few wins against guys with, 20-9 and 1, so experienced guys. And he's still like 9-0, so it's fine. But, like, I'm not sure if he was beating these guys up because he's so good, which it looked like it was the case, or these are so bad. It's kind of hard to say. But he was very exciting. His counter game was amazing. He was landing like counter right hooks, counter uppercuts, knocking people out dead. I'm going to go with this guy because he looks like a prospect.
Yeah.
I just don't know this competition he's for.
Yeah, Singbo, he seems Timur's coming in. When you look at his 3 UFC fights, he's fighting against guys who are newly signed to the UFC and that are he seems to be
that guy, isn't he?
It's not the gatekeeper. It's
the UFC gatekeeper.
Yeah, but no, it's gatekeeper is a weird one. It's like, you know, your front door,
the doorman.
Yeah, you're like not even like the gate is at the front, and he's like the driveway gatekeeper. Like, you know what I mean? It's when you're first signed to the promotion, he's the sort of guy to see where you are, see you're good enough for the UFC, and then you go on, you beat him, and then it's like,
yeah, he's a receptionist.
Yeah, he's like the doorman that opens the door for you, and you still have to go through the door. You know what I mean? So, yeah, but that's so disrespectful. The man's fighting in the UFC, but sure, fuck it. It's one of these ones that highlight reels. It's like when you look like, United are going to sign who? How long did I stick him in YouTube? Looks like a world beater. Yeah. Then it turns out he's Cleberson. Do you know what I mean? It's just not a world beater.
It's gone over all the Americans' heads.
But Cleberson was shit for those you don't know.
Yeah, absolutely horrendous footballer.
Song Bin Yo 8-15 and then 11-8. So I'll be taking Song Bin Yo.
I will too.
Song Bin Yo, probably get it done by finish as well.
I wouldn't have fancied promoting this card. There's a lot of guys on losses coming into this, you know?
Yeah. But Sean, it's a European card. So they don't have to stack it. They just sell it with 3 letters.
Yeah. No, you're right. I agree.
That's very true. 2 fights on the undercard that are really good. Stevie Ray and Leandro Santos. Very good fight. Tough fight for Stevie Ray. Well, tough fight for both. And Nick Hine against Frank Camacho. Frank Camacho is insanely entertaining to watch. Nick Hine can be, but Frank Camacho just keeps coming forward. He's a madman. So they're ones to look out at.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. They're the fights if we missed anyone under the radar, as we say in the the prelims, shout us, give out to us in the comments. But that's ESPN Plus 11 this Saturday night. Now it's time for Fight Your Corner. This is a part of the show where myself and Rob have to argue for a subject that Sean gives us. So if you win the epic battle of rock, paper, scissors, you are pro what Sean gives us. If you lose, you're against. So as I said, how we decide that is rock, paper, scissors on 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, Rob wins. Sean,
throw you snip me rock.
What have you got?
This week, obviously UFC Stockholm is on. Not a great card. The co-main event has two big names in it. The main event, 2 big names. The co-main event has a guy coming off 3 losses and another guy coming off a loss. And what I'm asking you is, are European fans taking for mugs with these cards? Because a lot of the time they're not great. So yeah.
So what's pro and what's con?
Rob won, so he was saying he's pro that European fans are taking for mugs.
Okay.
You want to go first, Rob, or?
I'll let Noel go first.
Okay.
Are UFC fans being taken for mugs?
For mugs.
European fans.
Translate that to American.
Oh, what did I say?
Taken for mugs. Is that?
Are European fans being
hoodwinked?
Bullshitted.
Yeah. Hoodwinked.
Yeah.
Get the short end of the stick.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to think of my argument here. You're talking about a main event that the 2 fighters have come off challenging for the world title. So if you look at that and you think, we're being mugged off here or hoodwinked, I think that's a little unfair on the athletes, both in the main event and the card as an entirety. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, that the UFC consider Europe or outside of America as their big market. They consider it as making money. But in a sense of the cards that we've been given, like the recent European shows that you look at, the likes of Masvidal and Darren Till in the UK. Again, Darren Till just coming off a world title. So you're getting high caliber fighters. You've Volkan Ozdemir, yes, he's coming off. He's on a 3-fight losing streak. He won his last fight against Riz, got robbed. But again, he's a couple of fights out of challenging for the world title. You've Jimmy Manawa against Rashik, who is, Manawa is like a big dog, heavy hitter, so he's really going to show where Alexander is on this card, and you're looking at another potential 205 contender. So if you take the top 3 fights in this, you're talking about 6 of the top contenders aiming to challenge John Jones for his title. So John Jones is probably, in many people's opinion, the greatest of all time. Be it if you agree with him or like him or dislike him, he's the greatest fighter that I think, in my opinion, has ever stepped into the UFC octagon. Bear in mind then you're going to have 6 fighters who are challenging in this division. So I think this card is actually stacked, and what they do well with Europe is they bring in fighters from that region as well to give them the platform in the UFC. You look at Chris Fishgold, he's a promotional champion of Cage Warriors coming in to fight in the UFC. It's not as hard on him traveling to the States, setting up that line of attack to bringing a camp over to America is quite difficult. To train, to fly your whole team over, expensive, not as bad bringing to Stockholm. So as well then your local fans, you have a lot of local fighters fighting on the big stage. Further down the camp, we call out in our picks down the line. You have Nick Hain fighting, you have Stevie Ray fighting. There's great fights throughout this that, although it mightn't have the likes of your John Jones, your Conor McGregor's anymore, your big superstars of the UFC on it, it's still got elite athletes. You're talking about 6 fighters who are potentially going to be fighting for a world title or have just come off a world title. So no, they are not being mugged off or hoodwinked. They're getting high level competition and big division matchups on this card.
I obviously think they are. I think the way the UFC structure these Europe events is they go as cheap as possible, and that's not a slight to the fighters. I just think that they bring in a lot of local guys who they don't need to fly out, they don't need to put up. They bring them in because they're a lower paid fighter, and they give the fans a lesser product. I think the UFC have such a huge roster that they could put big names in Europe, but the fact that they always kind of bring the same guys back, and Gustafsson and, as you said, Anthony Smith have fought for titles. I don't think any of them are getting title shots anytime soon, especially Smith, who had a very poor performance against John Jones, and John Jones is just head and shoulders above most of these guys. Same with Volkan Ozdemir, 3-fight losing streak in the co-main event. I think that's a pretty poor showing by the UFC, who are supposed to be the best organisation in the world. And even Ilir Latifi, he's never really got to those heights, and he's still co-headlining events. He's a solid fighter, but he's not really an attraction that European fans want to see. And as well, even for the fighter, like you said that, putting them local is an advantage for them. But it's also, for me, it's a bad thing for them because they're not on the cards where they can really be seen. We just spoke to James Lynch, who spoke about this card being so poor that a lot of American fans probably won't watch it. So when these guys who fight in these European cards who, which aren't promoted, like I haven't seen anything being promoted about these cards, when they fight on these undercards and nobody watches them, nobody still knows who these guys are. So when they move over to the States or move to potentially bigger cards, you still don't know who they are. So you only get a certain amount of time in the cage, and it's almost a disservice to some of these fighters being put on really poor, under-promoted cards with a lot of local guys who are good fighters, but for the wider audience and for the European fans, I think the fact that you're bringing your big organisation, the UFC, over, and you're not putting the guys that they want to see on the card, you're putting guys that they could probably see on the local scene anyway. I think it's a disservice to the fans, and I think they are being hoodwinked.
I'll bring you back to Darren Till. If you look at Darren Till's fights, Jorge Masvidal, he's fought Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. You're talking about top fighters. That card against Masvidal, your co-main event was Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards is on an absolute insane run in the UFC. We had Pete Carroll on last week. He was saying, how is this guy not getting a title shot? He's on a 7-fight win streak and he's not getting a title shot. You're further down the card in that card, you Dominic Reyes against Volkan Ozdemir. You're talking, these are, again, all the guys in the top end of their divisions that are there or thereabouts. In some ways, you said about Volkan Ozdemir, that's a bad showing. Earlier on today, you've already said that Ozdemir, you thought it was closer than what I did, but you thought Ozdemir won the fight. So you're talking about a decision that puts you either side of it. You like your Nathaniel Woods fighting on the card. You know what I mean? So it is there. They have to, these guys can't come. Leon Edwards being an example. Leon Edwards, he can't just go to America and fight on the big Vegas card. He has to have that following of crowd behind him. And that's what they've done with Darren Till. Darren Till is similar. Till almost reminds me a little bit, and I know he's sick of this, but he almost has that McGregor following as well. He has a big following of his home country, and he also drags some fans in from Brazil from his time living out there. But again, they've built him up as this huge prospect that they're showcasing on the local scene, and it's not as if it's in the local gym with they've just put a UFC case. These are big venue arenas that they're showcasing and putting. But they're talking about the top guys. Like if you pick the last 3 or 4 European cards, and you're talking about guys who are in the top 5 of each division that are at the higher end of the card. You could go and look at a Vegas card, and you might only look at the co-main and the main, and you might see the rest is lower. I just think we're more critical of the card because we're European, and we're just... MMA fans are greedy. We just want more. But you're talking the next card, the last card before that, you're talking about the top end of that card. You're talking about 6 world-class top 10 and top 5 and title challengers. We've had world title fights over here. So, yeah, I don't think they're getting hoodwinked by any stretch.
I think you can argue that most of them aren't really stars. Like I think Darren Till, of everyone that you kind of said, is probably the biggest star there. And like he is a local guy.
Jorge Masvidal's not a star right now.
He's not really a star. Like he hasn't proven this to headline pay-per-views. He hasn't sold pay-per-views. He's not a star. Like the UFC would come out and they would say that Jorge Masvidal isn't a star. He's a great fighter, phenomenal fighter, but he's been around for a while. Hasn't really sold that many pay-per-views, if any. Like he hasn't headlined pay-per-view cards. And then like you look at the likes of Leon Edwards.
Cowboy Cerrone's been fighting in Europe a lot.
Yeah,
but if McDonald's not a big star.
He's a star, but again, he's not this headliner, big. Like if you go back to the old European cards before they kind of made the switch to kind of make these cards big.
But like I think just to compare Europe to America, I think is unfair in the argument, because you're going to have your biggest fights. Like UFC will always have their biggest fights in Vegas. They consider that Vegas, New York, or Toronto. That seems to be their 3 big, huge venues. Yeah. So yeah, well, name of Elias has gone probably. But they are the 3 big venues that they put all their big shows on, big fights on. Potentially now Abu Dhabi coming up and stuff like that. But they still put strong cards on with top level guys. The top end of the card, yeah, you could argue the low end might be local guys that you mightn't heard of, but the top end of the card, you're talking about 3 fights on each card that are world beaters, potential world champions.
Yeah, but if you look at, like you brought up Leon Edwards as an example, and you look at Leon Edwards and you ask why isn't he fighting these big guys, and I think it's a part of this. He's on these kind of poor cards in Europe that he's just not being seen, and American fans don't know who he is.
Are you telling me people didn't tune in and watch Leon Edwards beat the shit out of Donald Cowboy Cerrone?
I don't think so.
Yes, they did.
That was. I don't think they did. That was also in Singapore.
That counts as Europe.
Yeah, Singapore counts as Europe. But I just don't think people are tuning in. So the only time that people saw him was when he got punched in the background because it was all over social media. But people
where did that happen?
People weren't watching the event. People weren't watching the event.
But where did he get punched?
Yeah, but people weren't.
No, just to confirm for me, where did he get punched?
It was at that show. But people did.
Where though?
But people were talking about the social media event that happened. The social media event that happened afterwards. Nobody cared about.
It was a post-fight interview.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it was a thing post-fight interview. Nobody cared about the actual fight.
Jorge Masvidal. Everybody was watching.
Nobody cared about the actual fight. Nobody saw that. Nobody was talking about. No, they were like, oh, this guy had a post-fight interview and he had a fight in the backstage.
Leon Edwards came off a brilliant performance over Gunnar Nelson that night.
And nobody was talking about it. They were talking about all the stuff on social media. They weren't talking about the event because nobody's watching the events. They're not promoted well.
To counter-argue that, were many people talking about the Khabib fight after the Conor thing? No, they're all talking about the mass brawl after it. So I think they...
No, but yeah.
Comparable. Yeah, when something like that happens, something else happens.
Sure. But what I'm saying is the reason why people aren't talking about Leon Edwards is because he's been stuffed on these cards in Europe, one time in Singapore. The last time he fought in the States, was like 6 or like 8 fights ago or something like that. But he's been in Europe and nobody has seen him because the cards aren't great.
You got to build prospects. You got to build them up. Have a rack of wins.
Yeah, but if you have 8 fights,
boom.
You should, and you have 8 wins or 9 wins.
You could argue it the other way. Like if you look at somebody like Tom Duquesnoy, for example, he had a big following, and he has retired, looking after his dog and modelling. But if you look at Tom Duquesnoy, fought in America loads, done nothing for him. Well, if the UFC had him over fighting Europe a lot, the way he was the BAMA champion, 2-time champion, they might have built him up and promoted him a bit more that way. But I don't think they're getting hoodwinked or mugged.
I think so. I just think if you look at some of the guys on this card coming up, like Daniel Tamor on the main card, 6-3, it's not great. Like Jimmy Manuwa, good fighter, but he's kind of on the end of the thing, and he's third from the top.
Yeah, but look who he's fighting. Look who he's fighting.
Yeah, but Volkan. Yeah, but you wouldn't get this on a big card. This is not what European fans want. European fans want big stars. They're not getting big stars here. They've seen Alexander Gustafsson so many times. They've seen Anthony Smith.
Hold on. We've seen. So you're telling me that if the UFC rolled out in Dublin here and Conor McGregor was the headline, we'd all go, I've seen Conor McGregor fight loads of times.
That's a completely different argument. That's Conor McGregor.
Alexander Gustafsson is the Conor McGregor of Sweden.
Oh, that's a bit fucking...
Yes, he is.
That's a bit much now. That's a bit much.
Sean.
That's a bit much.
Who wins? You decide.
I'm going to give that one to Noel.
Fuck that.
Get out of town, really?
I thought you went about it with the England card, right? I think the two cards have been polar ends. I thought the England card was really good.
Yeah, England card. That was. But I honestly think that was their response to Bellator.
Yeah.
Bellator are doing huge things.
The
here
Sweden card is shit. I thought comparing America to Europe was a bit. Yeah, I don't think you can compare America to Europe.
No.
Because we're never going to get the American style cards. But I think if every European card...
How did you lose that argument?
I got absolutely hoodwinked.
How did you lose that argument?
Although, to be honest, I'm on the other side of the argument. I actually agree with you.
Do you?
Yeah, I agree with it. Yeah.
I think the card I used, the till, and then I tried to use Darren Till, the Bisbee cards and stuff. But
yeah, I agree with that one. But
that's crazy because when you said that subject, I'm like, how the fuck am I even going to get near winning this one? Crazy.
The joke. Bring that to the commission.
Bring it. Bring it to the high courts. Ring Joe Duffy.
The fucking criminal court.
Ring Joe Duffy or ring your man. Someone who gives a fuck. Let's move it on and let's get educating young Sean. So it's that time of the week now where we educate young Sean. So Sean, get out your school bag and get your homework ready. We gave you a couple of fights last week. The first fight I gave you was Carlos Condit against Dan Hardy. Again, he's going to score this out of 5 championship rounds. But what did you think of the fight? And isn't Carlos Condit just the greatest fighter ever?
This was a really good fight. Yeah, Condit looked like an absolute killer. An absolute stonewall killer. I was really looking forward to seeing Hardy as well because obviously I only know him from the punditry inside the octagon, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, he looked good as well. His walkout with it, or when Buffer's announcing him in the cage, and he's loving it as well. That was really cool. He was proper out there, obviously with the mohawk and stuff. But Condit really impressed me. He absolutely crumpled Hardy with that shot.
It was like Apollo and Rocky when they both throw the shot at the same time, except you see the end result, and that was Dan Hardy getting KO'd. But phenomenal momentum, technique, everything. He just had the sharper, crisper technique in that combination to land that hook. Oh, what a fucking finish.
You call him a killer, you might call him a natural
born killer. 5 championship rounds, that's his nickname, Sean, in case you were wondering why Rob was being a dope.
It is, I know. I'll give it a 4.
A 4? Why the deduction?
Didn't go long enough.
Story of your life.
Nice.
It's funny because it's true.
Second fight Rob gave you was
Poirier Korean Zombie.
Oh, yeah. This is a really good fight.
Oh, look at the little lappy heading them.
Yeah, it's a fun fight.
This one was a bit of a war. Both guys kind of ran out of gas later in the rounds. Just kept coming. Dustin was a bit of a madman, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Kept coming. Obviously, Korean Zombie, an absolute lunatic as well. He doesn't have the nickname Zombie.
He hasn't really changed. Poirier has changed, but Zombie hasn't.
Really enjoyed this one. Both guys kept coming forward. Dustin was coming off to into Max as well after that. So yeah, really good fight. Really enjoyed it. A lot of blood. A lot of blood. Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think I know the score of this, but out of 5 championship rounds,
I'd give it a 5. Yeah.
Nice.
And would that be a fight now that if somebody said to you, like you're talking about your dad or whatever, like would you say, Dad, sit down, watch this fight?
Probably not my dad, no, but some of my friends were trying to get into MMA. I've actually watched MMA with my dad, right? Yeah. And he's looking at it and he's like, these guys are animals. Like, why are you watching this? And I'm like, that's exactly why I'm watching it. Because they're savages.
Selling off the gore of it.
Yeah.
So you fight. We're going with 5 championship rounds.
Did some extracurricular activities this week, didn't I? Watched John Wayne Power's documentary.
Oh,
yeah.
It
was really good.
Great documentary.
He put in the group chat. We have a group chat, lads. Any sports documentaries, yada yada yada. Right, and I was like, yeah. Dan said a couple. I wrote back with 2 girls and 1 cup. It's about two women who want to do anything for that, or who are willing to do anything for that cup. And I got no reaction. And I was like, in all seriousness, though, check out John Wayne Parr's, and I sent you the link.
I said the Smashing Machine, which you should definitely watch. The Smashing Machine is awesome.
Is that Coleman? Is it, or who's this?
Coleman's in it. It's about Mark Kerr. Yeah, it's awesome.
But yeah, I love that. John Wayne Parr. It just
Really
shows
good, he seems
how
a
much
really
he was
nice guy.
embraced in Thailand and embraced.
They
life.
loved him in Thailand as well. The families he stayed with and stuff. He's just one of them.
Yeah.
Right, so your homework for next week. I am bringing you to the WEC.
WWE, I thought you were going to say.
No, WE Stone Cold. No, WEC. This is headlined by Jose Aldo and Uriah Faber. This is voted one of the greatest featherweight fights of all time.
All time.
Leonard Garcia and the Korean Zombies making a return for you
again.
again. So we've got Leonard Garcia against the Korean Zombie, WEC 48, which took place. When did this take place? I've lost that information. I imagine this was a fair while ago. I've lost that information, but sure, look. No, hold on. Have it here. 2010. April 2010.
Okay.
So, 9 years ago.
Okay. So that's an awesome fight.
Yeah. And Robert.
I can't wait to rewatch that now. I have one because I'm not sure if you watched this or not. It's a return of somebody we gave you before. If you have watched it, I have a backup, and then I have a backup for that backup. It's UFC 171. It's the main event. It's Johnny Hendricks versus Robbie Lawler.
No, not seen it.
Great stuff.
I would have thought you would have seen Robbie Lawler because I know you went in a bit of a Robbie Lawler.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
And now I have two for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's Rob tied over. So yeah, look, we're educating young Sean. If you haven't seen them fights, go back, tell us what you think of them, because they are two crackers, to be fair. And WEC was so much fun. This was one where they rolled out the big ones. They had Goldie and Rogan and Buffer. This one they done that the odd time, especially when the UFC
was the big
was
ones,
really starting to absorb them.
Aldo versus Uriah was a huge fight.
Yeah,
for the time.
absolutely. But like, we're just looking back at the card. They start calling out like you've Benson Henderson fighting Donald Cerrone on it. You've the likes of Mike Brown fighting. You've the likes of Scott Jorgensen. You've Anthony Pettis. Brad Pickett beat Demetrius Johnson. Like it's insane, the cards on it. So go back, watch WEC 48. It is phenomenal. This is where we finish the show. It's weird. It's wonderful. It's Sean's weird news. So Sean, what have you got for us this week?
Yeah, so this week, I think fairly sure we've all seen this knockout, but it's a really quick knockout, so I said we'd watch it.
I believe it's the fastest in PFL history.
Yep, 10 seconds.
Jeez. Yeah, it's a cracker. There's Ali Abdelaziz. Holy fucking Jesus. Did Damon Jackson shoot for a takedown there?
That's nasty.
Did he?
Is go back there. I want to have a look because I actually started looking at Ali as you said it. Is he judging?
Is he fuck?
No, he's not.
Because watch, he writes, watch. He's probably going, sign him up.
I think that's his fire, isn't it? Does he still work for the PFL? I know he used to, which is a bit.
There's one more look at it, Sean.
Yeah.
Now I can see about did he go.
Good game planning though, because
he started duck down to fake.
Yeah, he was.
I like the way he didn't
faking the
follow
takedown.
up.
He was faking the takedown anyway. But Damon Jackson, that's what he does. He's a wrestling guy.
Yeah.
You know, he wrestles.
could watch that
Springing it, like, look.
Yeah, good game plan.
I could watch that all day.
Man,
That is a badass knockout.
like he's out cold. Like that. The weird. Yeah.
The
That's
old thing
phenomenal.
folded like a deck chair, very similar to Diego Sanchez and Matt Brown. Remember the UFC cut off to the empty press room as there was a knockout, and John Anik was like, "We might need to show you some pictures of."
Oh
the
yeah,
knockout."
sure,
Like,
some pictures.
we
Yeah,
want to see the fucking knockout,
I'd have bet on that, as well.
bro.
So obviously we spoke as well about Elias Theodorou getting cut. Norman Park tweeted about it as well. So we're reporting that the UFC have released Elias Theodorou, and then Sean Sheehan, who we've had on before, tweeted about it. 8-3 in the UFC. Wasn't expecting that. Storm and Norman Park came back with, "That'll tighten the cunt for slabbering about me. Ran around the octagon like a pussy little bitch."
Norman,
he's you know that's rare for Norman, isn't it?
he gets cunt into a tweet.
That
Pussy and a little bitch.
My favourite part about it was that'll tighten the cunt. That's a proper Irish phrase,
that is
isn't
a
it?
fucking proper Irish phrase.
Yeah.
Norman Park, man, 4-5 win streak.
He's on a run.
Norman Park is on a 4-5 win streak.
To be honest, I'd say he's been paid pretty well over at KSW.
KSW, yeah, and
he's kind of etching. Yeah, he's etching a little.
He's built up the little.
He's a little heel.
He's like the heel, but they all kind of like him.
Yeah, he's like the kind of cool heel.
I'd like
But he's
to
like,
see
he's like the foreign heel, like in the wrestling.
Norman, because remember we spoke with Norman Park a few times. And speaking of Belfast, to me he sounded like a man who was very close to retirement.
Oh, 100%.
Very close.
Very
and
close.
now you look at him, he's
sure, wasn't he going to bare knuckle box at one point?
Yeah,
he was
signed up to bare
yeah.
knuckle box. Yeah. And now he's absolutely flying 4-0 and back fighting in KSW, and he seems to have found a home in KSW
and he's
as well.
writing poetry on Twitter, so
Absolute poet. At 10 a.m.
Yeah,
That's how aggressive an MMA fighter is. It's 10 past 10 in the morning, and he's going. That'll tighten
up on the
cunt
fucking,
for slapping me.
he was up on the elliptical machine, just fucking
Fantastic. Well done.
Moonlighting as a
That's the Twitter highlight of the week.
No updates on Will Fleury's diet this week, so hopefully have some more of them next week.
Great stuff.
No doubt Spuds were involved.
He'll surprise us one day.
And not have Spuds.
He'll have like a sweet potato
rice
or something.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I say Will Fleury hates sweet potato. You know that? He's totally against it.
Yeah, it's too Mediterranean.
Yeah. Too Mediterranean.
Sorry, no, I cut across.
It's fine. I was just wrapping up. A few good fights. Episode 13. Thank you to James Lynch for coming on and talking the big MMA news. Good fights going down this weekend. Although it's a typical European card. Enjoy the fights. Sean, Rob, it's been a pleasure. Just next week, folks, is a bank holiday here in Ireland. Jesus, I've made a mess of this. But so we will probably be from home. So it won't be in the beautiful studio that you see before you now. But yeah, if you haven't already, hit subscribe, hit the bell so the bells will ring and the dragon won't attack. But for 13, peace. So apparently if you press this button somewhere here, it subscribes and you get all the notifications for the show. So hit that button there.
You have to click the bell though to get the notifications
here.
down the bottom.
Make sure you hit it and they get the ringer things because Rob didn't know. So it's the button there. Or there.
It's somewhere roughly around that area.